Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Delta Slay, and today we're going to do a reaction video to, well, over Sarcastic Productions and a new video called Trope Talk. Well, it's a Trope Talk that is about Toon Armor, which, do I actually know what we're going into? Not exactly. I am going to assume it's about some Looney Tunes ass shit because of the name and thumbnail, but let's begin.
If you've ever engaged with the literary criticism space in any sort of action heavy genres, you've probably heard the term plot armor. Plot armor is a phenomenon where a character's narrative
Yes.
importance and centralization in the plot provides them with a sometimes implausible level of protection against things that would easily maim or kill a side character. Plot armor might let a main character walk off anything from a bullet to a building exploding, because the purpose of these threats in story is not to kill the protagonist, it's to challenge them, to increase the tension and or leave them vulnerable in interesting ways.
Oh my god. What's your plot armor? I'm friends with Superman. What? Yep.
Essentially, it doesn't matter how realistically deadly or damaging a hit should be. If they're a main character who needs to continue participating in the plot, they're not going to get one-shotted. And plot armor doesn't just keep characters alive, it also keeps them active so they can continue to participate in the story and move the plot along. Even a non-lethal injury can dramatically slow the plot down, and there's a difference between a protagonist staggering out of a car crash with a limp and a protagonist spending 2 months recovering in a hospital and then another 6 weeks in physical therapy.
Ah.
Plot armor mostly gets focused when it's being called out as a problem or a symptom of weak writing, but it's basically just a facet of suspension of disbelief, where the audience is expected to understand that a story randomly killing off a main character on whom much of the plot is dependent will probably severely impact that story's effectiveness. When we suspend our disbelief, we accept that sometimes the story makes the plot better by doing things that don't 100% make sense. But plot armor isn't the only factor that shapes how resilient the characters are. After all, plot armor is for important characters only, and does absolutely nothing to protect
No.
side characters, background extras, a main character's beloved extended family, etc. But even without the protection of plot armor, background characters in one story might walk off the kind of damage that would have fully exploded them in another. In one
That actually does fucking annoy me with some characters. You're like, hold up, you're saying that this little ass minion survived my ultra mega death beam? It's like, yes, we're at the end of the story. Everyone's getting stronger. Everything's becoming more difficult. That's bullshit. Why are the henchmen getting stronger?
story, it might be unthinkable to ever see visible blood, while in another, it might be impossible for a character to get through a grocery trip without getting doused in 3 pints of the stuff.
Oh yeah.
This is a phenomenon that I've taken to calling tone armor. Through every genre
Oh.
and every form of media, every story sets a tone. Now, tone is a deceptively massive concept influenced by a ton of factors, and because it's basically another word for vibes, we're not going to be able to nail down a rigid set of rules for defining it. It's shaped by the feel of the dialogue, the emotional range of the characters, the density of jokes, the musical score, the ambient lighting and color grading, the statements it makes on human nature.
For fuck's sake, I have a very different tone than what a lot of people have. I like the idea of just having extremely dark characters in a fucking beautiful, bright, colorful world. That's just a common symptom of how I do things.
The character choices it rewards or punishes, the tone of the story is the sum of a massive number of parts. In a way, it's kind of like the temperature of a room. A lot of factors are influencing it, but you're basically only going to notice it if it makes you uncomfortable or if it's changing rapidly. And the thing is, the tone of a story does fluctuate, sometimes significantly. Some stories get progressively more mature and dark over time. Some go from
Yeah.
episodic, disconnected adventures to overarching grand-scale threats. Many games let their narrative stakes escalate alongside the protagonist's power scaling. Some shows have notably dark episodes that are memorably scarring, and there's a whole set of tropes based around a
People who have ever watched the Kingdom of Ruin are dying right now. I have no idea what the fuck that is. Though it sounds like it would be interesting. At least from the title alone.
story hitting unexpectedly.
Let's take Cerberus syndrome. When a story starts light and gets serious. Knight of Cerberus. A character whose introduction heralds a dark tone shift. I have a whole ass idea for that where I just okay. Cerberus callback. Something light and funny is referenced in a new unhappy context. Oh, I love that one even more. Okay, for reference, I have like a protagonist, right? Where their whole thing is well, not what their whole thing, but originally at the beginning of the story, we all know that protagonist parents don't live, and due to the fact that I don't like beating around the bush and be like, oh no, is she gonna live or is she not? I just give her 1,000 death flags, and I make you love the person even though you know they're gonna die. You know. But one of the things is the protagonist likes his hair short. He would rather cut it all off and be bald. although his parent loves it being long. And so, the joke of someone going, hey, why don't you just cut it all off and throw everything that you didn't like it away? Is a joke that you would see in the very beginning of the arc. But once the parent is dead, he's now growing out here constantly. So when his friend says it again, it takes on a whole new meaning as his parent is now dead and he has the choice of either throw away everything or keep it. Then we have Cerberus retcon. Something we thought was light and funny is retcon to be tragic. Ew. Although retconning can be interesting depending on the situation.
Hard by taking a turn that's outside the current scope of the expected tone. If you want to look into some of those tropes, a lot of them are bundled under the Cerebus syndrome umbrella, which describes stories that establish a relatively lighthearted tone and then take an unexpected turn into extremely dark directions. It's rare for stories to go the other way, except in the sense that dark stories can have happy endings, but I'm sure it's happened somewhere. The thing is, deviating from a story's established tone is a powerful tool. If a story never shows blood, even a single visible drop can be immensely impactful, but in order
Oh
to get the
fuck
power
yeah.
from breaking those rules, the rules need to be solidly established first, and with something as vibes-based as tone, those rules are set down subtly. The tone of the story gives the audience an expected
Hold on. A story's tone might look like death, self-harm, trauma, hopelessness, kids in severe peril. French can take it, French to break it up.
Tension, protagonist, having snuff. Friends in conflict, injustice and cruelty, fear, serious injury, innuendo, and collateral damage.
Or likely, whips, bloodless action, emotional resolution, and good guys do good things. It's echoing a bit. Ah, fuck.
range of what kinds of things can or can't happen. This can range in scale from good will always triumph in the end and heroic intentions will be rewarded because this is a story about good people being vindicated, to just whether or not characters can swear more than once a movie. The tone of a story is kind of a soft-edged probability map of what kinds of things can be expected to happen in the story versus what kinds of things are quite unlikely.
I now want to see a movie where someone starts it off as if it was the fucking Care Bears. Enjoy. And after the first fucking kill, you just turn on a door. Like, you open up a door, immediately you reach inside this closet. You reach your hand up to the top to pull out something from the top shelf. You pull it back, only for there to be another box on top that slides off as fast as possible. It domes that person, clocks them over the head, and they're dead. You're just like, what? What just fucking happened? It was like, oh, breakneck pace. He's dead. Anyways, we're gonna now move on to the monster that's coming through your window. What?
Likely. In classic heroic fantasy, the tone makes things like good guys win in the end fairly likely, and protagonist randomly takes an arrow to the face halfway through rather unlikely. In a zombie apocalypse, the tone makes a happy ending for all main characters catastrophically unlikely, but it's also pretty unlikely that the main character is gonna die to anything other than a zombie bite, since the tone typically centralizes that as the core of the underlying horror, and anything
Ooh, I now kind of. If you did like a really sad tragedy of someone who was some really big hero who died a insignificant death. Ooh, I know how you could do that. You give them the same death that they give to whatever the fuck Zorro's friend's name was. You know, the one who fell down the stairs. You killed the Demon King. You slayed armies. You wrestled with the devil himself. Oh wait, no, that's the Demon King. You bartered with God and you tricked the angels. And then you fell down some stairs.
else would be almost a letdown. Although, if it's a zombie apocalypse where the tone is more broadly nihilistic, the main characters can theoretically die from anything, since meaningless random cruelty serves the tone. If anything, the most unlikely outcome in a zombie apocalypse is anyone behaving like a decent human being. In an episode
yeah,
of
no, that's
Scooby-Doo,
true.
the tone forecast suggests a surfeit of wacky shenanigans and traps, but it's very unlikely that we're gonna
I'm gonna say it's right here, right now. If you say that about anything, One Piece is one of those things that you can watch, and it is worth it. Although it is long, it is worth the amount of time that you will invest in it. I will not try to force you, and I will not try to push you to do it. That is not my place. But god damn it, it is worth it.
gonna see Shaggy throw out his back from carrying a 140-pound Great Dane. Realistically, none of these unlikely events are actually impossible, they just don't fit the vibes, and thus the characters are invisibly protected from them, a kind of armor that they acquire from the tone. A story that takes a comedic, cartoony tone will likely play fast and loose with the laws of physics, and the characters will correspondingly be extremely sturdy. A character face to face with a bomb will be reduced to an ash pile with 2 blinking eyes. A character that gets shot with a gun will have their duckbill cartoonishly spin around their face. A character careening off a cliff will explode and then be back one scene later. In this established tonal context, it would be extremely jarring for a character to get hit with a mallet and consequently be hospitalized with a brain injury, or even for a
Oh my god. When you start fighting, wait. Okay, so I like power scaling a lot. Imagine someone that you have like Toon Force, right? You have the ability to make everything jokes and shit, and they have the anti-Toon Force. They make shit serious. Negative Toon Force. You pull out the thing and like, man, I can shoot myself and I won't even take damage. Ends up blowing his own damn head off. He's like, you should have took things more seriously.
character to get a paper cut and visibly bleed. The tone of the story doesn't allow for it. This is tone armor, the set of assumptions and standards that a story's tone establishes.
Oh my god, like they suddenly lose Toon Force. Ooh, the whole point of the movie is to get the Toon Force back. Meanwhile, the bad guy is just like, why did you steal the Toon Force? Oh, because it makes no damn sense. I can't understand it, and I don't find it funny. And since it's not funny to me, I'll ruin it for everyone else. Basically, learning with Pibby, except actually plausible. Pibby? Pibby? Who's Pibby? What is that?
Establishes specifically in the context of endangering the characters. Despite what the cartoonish example might imply, tone armor is not actually a case of more realism equals darker story equals nastier injuries. For one thing, humans in real life are deceptively durable and capable
The people who survive nightmare situations. Oh yeah, no, that is true. Remember this. Motherfuckers be surviving shit. There's too many times where I've done things that shouldn't have happened.
of surviving
People
some
do
pretty
things.
bananas things, but in, for example, sword and sorcery fantasy, the heroes might swing their way through an army of minions and take them all down permanently with one sword stroker light stab each. This is a combo of plot and tone armor, where the bad guy's status as faceless side characters affords them negative plot armor and lets a stiff breeze knock them over for convenience of pacing. But
Ooh. What if a thing where even though the side characters actually I was gonna say this, but then I remember exactly why that makes sense. I'm gonna say this again. This is like the second time in the stream that I've mentioned it. Blue Eyed Samurai. I love that series purely because the fucking enemies, even the fodder characters, you know that they're not gonna be as skilled as our lovely Mizu. They're still just as fucking durable. They're almost terrifying because Mizu in a 1v1 with a random fodder character is like, oh yeah, they're gonna take him. The second you add in a single other person, Mizu has to reconsider every aspect of the fight. Ugh. All the Hanna-Barbera characters and some beloved Cartoon Network characters running from static that turns them into monsters. Ew. Interesting.
it's also tone armor, because a hero bloodlessly dancing their way through an army of goons is quick and clean and exciting to watch, and it spares us from watching any slow or icky consequences to that kind of combat. We don't see those stricken minions slowly and horrifically die in a field hospital like we'd expect from the tone of a tragic.
Nah. I say I want to slaughter, right? Main character walks by, slaughters everybody, leaves them all on the ground bleeding. With one swing each, right? Completely removes arms and limbs just with one swing, straight through. Easy cuts. And then he walks back afterwards with a little fire spell and cauterizes all their wounds. Says, you should have chosen not to work for that man. And then leaves. He doesn't help them get up. He doesn't pick them up. He doesn't help them at all. Just seals their wounds and leaves them. From Montania. Clean cut.
war movie, and we also don't typically see half of those minions stand up again with minor scratches on their sturdy leather armor ready for another go like we might expect from real life. In this case, tone armor dictates that faceless minions basically get 1 hit point each, and when they're hit, they're cleanly down forever, which is not innately realistic. It just makes for good fight choreography, and it adheres to the heroic fantasy tone. Tone armor is largely defined by the preferences of the writer and the kind of story they want to tell, but sometimes it's also affected by outside factors, one of which is intended audience. The younger an audience for a story, the less likely that's
I forgot. You know what? I really need to remember when Steven Universe characters get stabbed, they aren't dead. I forgot this was an episode, and I legitimately pictured Pearl being dead just now. I was like, ah. And then I had to remember the whole point of this episode is that she's not dead.
story is to expose its audience to certain kinds of danger or injury. It's not seen as appropriate, and while plenty of kids are super down with murder,
Watching Doctor Who's Empty Child at age 9, artist rendering colorized. The effects have gotten so good. Oh, that reminds me of some interesting movies I saw when I was younger. I should not have watched the Elm Streets and the horror movies, all the murder movies. To be fair, murder movies, like horror movies, fucked me up far less than watching true crime. Genuine true crime is the most terrifying thing you could put on for a child because that's reality.
certain kinds of body horror can stick with you if you aren't prepared for them, so they get glossed over or kept off screen or replaced with a more bloodless, non-lethal variant of the threat. Also, lots of stories for younger audiences skew more comedic, and in the interests of tonal consistency, if you're aiming for haha comedy fun times, you probably don't want to interrupt the good times too much with visceral unpleasantness. Cartoon violence doesn't tend to overlap with
Also, by the way, you can have jokes in the middle of slaughter. I, I've seen plenty of jokey shit in the middle of a fucking slaughter. Not for children, but you know. I used to watch CSI and NCIS when I was 5 at FBI. Yeah, they were good shows. I'm talking about the ones where they just straight up just tell you the story of how she was fought. Like, I've watched shows on cable when I had cable where it was just like, oh, I'm just going to explain step by step, detail by detail, by the minute of how this person died, how they were severely attacked and assaulted. It was just like, ah, interesting.
haunting violence. There's also intended audience factors that have almost nothing to do with age and everything to do with genre. For instance, if you're writing some sort of romance, the only injury a character can likely expect is the kind that artfully lays them up in bed so their love interest can care for them without any messy side effects or complications. In this case, tone armor will keep the characters whole and pretty no matter what kind of horrible things they're going through, because being pretty is kind of foundational to the genre and to the
Nah. What if we just tear off their face? Tear off the face and the love of comedy.
appeal to its audience. The other big outside factor that can affect tone armor is standards and practices.
What?
A lot of stories are affected by the presence of a distributor or an editor looking over
Oh,
the creator's
yeah,
shoulder and
fucking
telling them
hell.
things like, you can't show that on television. It's a form of moderate to severe censorship that is the trade-off many stories make in exchange for widespread distribution, and it very commonly manifests in hard limitations placed on the story's tone. For instance, it's very common for kids' TV shows to shy away from blood, which means characters might end a fight covered in anime scuff marks or bleed in unusual color to take the edge off, or only ever fight robots that bleed robot juice. In some cases, standards and practices might shy away from acknowledging death at all. This was weirdly common in 90s to 2000s anime dubs that had to take the source material and make it appropriate for an American Saturday morning time slot, which led to things like Yu-Gi-Oh's Shadow Realm.
Ah, the Shadow Realm. The most available and immediately best thing ever. You realize how much power that the Shadow Realm holds. It is a thing purely created by the dubbed canon of 4Kids. But it is eerily stronger than anything you will ever imagine. I don't know why the fuck I'm doing this voice, but I kinda like it. Anyways, we're gonna get on. Keep on.
which exists in the original but gets much less screen time because pretty much any time a character is in danger of being sent to the Shadow Realm in the dub, it's because the actual stakes were death. Death is not okay, but a horrifying death-like hell dimension is totes kid-friendly. And like, yes, that's objectively hilarious logic, but it's a form of tone armor that has a legitimate impact on how the story feels. Replacing buzzsaws with dark energy discs that send you to the Shadow Realm if they touch you is very funny and very stupid, and I feel so bad for the team that had to paint over all those buzzsaws and also erase my Valentine's cleavage in every shot, but it establishes boundaries on the story's tone that the standards and practices people thought were more in line with a Saturday morning time slot for kids. The lower bound on the tone is having your soul sent to a nightmare dimension where you would probably not have a good time but could potentially be rescued. It is not having your legs sliced off by a saw trap. Considerations like this are all in service to keeping the tone light, although some forms of censorship backfire and they frequently diminish the impact of parts of the story that are actually supposed to be notably dark. I don't want to keep beating up on Yu-Gi-Oh, but Season 4, the evil bikers from Atlantis and objectively the best season, featured villain characters with backstories like entire family died in a shipwreck and War Orphan with dead little brother. And the dub kinda had to work overtime to change those to dude who got shipwrecked all by himself and turned his back on his family, and little brother got kidnapped by a tank. Which makes the part at the end where they're heartwarmingly reunited with the ghosts of their dead families kind of a giant confusing plot hole. When a writer wants to write a story with deadly stakes, but is forced to adhere to a tone armor paradigm that refuses to even acknowledge the existence of death, the story.
Wait, didn't E1 Yu-Gi-Oh just have a gun and Yugi getting mugged or threatened? Yeah. I also remember the scenes where, you know, Kaiba fucking jammed someone's gun with a card or was about to get shot and he jumped out a window. You know, like, there were weird times in Yu-Gi-Oh
can
with guns.
suffer, and the characters might end up getting threatened with something that's even worse, but technically PG. Tone armor is an invisible paradigm established by a story that quietly teaches the audience what level of danger and brutality.
If you go in that van, that man's gonna brutally murder you. Instead, it gets replaced with, if you go in that van, that man's gonna brutally kidnap you.
They can expect from the story. Most of the time, you will only think about tone armor when you see it break. And tone armor can break. In fact, breaking tone armor is one of the easiest ways to gut punch the audience because it hits them in a way they didn't realize they could be hit. One of the most common and powerful ways tone armor can be broken is probably pretty obvious because it's also a break in plot armor, killing a main character.
So, you know what I think's real good about killing main characters? Make it fucking permanent. Oh, you're gonna hurt my soul. But God, there's a reason why I like JJK. That's definitely one of the main reasons. Because JJK, fuck me, right? You know, fuck me. I love my boy Nanami, but y'all motherfuckers gotta kill his ass and say, nah, he gotta take an L. God damn, there's so many people I did not. So many people who didn't have to. Anyways,
Before
we're
a
gonna
main
keep
character dies, the tone of the story passively indicates that this is impossible. Main characters are protected from danger by plot armor and general narrative importance. Death might not even be a concept in this story, except as a vague implied threat if the heroes fail to save the day, which they won't. And then something happens. Maybe they hit a season finale and have to do a boss rush to get to the final battle, and the big guy takes a hit and doesn't get back up. Maybe the new bad guy is such bad news that they straight up murder someone just to prove they can. Maybe the power-up that always saves the day gets cut off mid-theme music when the hero gets fully backstabbed.
At first, I would say, yeah, that makes perfect sense to use this clip with Aang. But the second you bring up the theme music, all I can hear and see is Aizen, although they didn't die. So I guess it's not. You know what? That's not fitting.
Something happens that has never happened before, and it changes the game. When a main character is built up for the express purpose of killing them off to show the stakes, this character is called a sacrificial lion, and despite their appearance as a standard main character, most of these characters are constructed specifically to die. It's just a matter of how well the writer can conceal this fact before the point of impact. And
you know what? I literally mentioned at the very beginning of this that I have a whole ass character whose entire purpose is death. Although I don't conceal the fact that they're going to die, I instead make you love them while they're living. Which I think is the best way to do it. Oh, this person's destined to die and there's no way that you're gonna not see it coming? Okay, I'll just throw it in your face. And let everyone else around them enjoy them, love them, really, and get to know them. And then, while you're seeing them slightly get to their thing, you're thinking, oh, they're gonna get their dream and then they're gonna die, or oh, they're not gonna make it to their dream and then they'll die. No, I'll give them half of what they needed. They wanted to save this person, they'll get them out the door, and that person will get shot through the face. And go, wait, what? Ooh, that reminds me of a whole ass thing that I was thinking about at one point. Oh, wait here, what did Isaac say? Wait, Isaac. One thing I never understood was why not attack when they're powering up animation? Example, DBZ. While Goku is powering up or someone just punches them before they become Super Saiyan. That's old school anime shit. A lot of new school anime is just like fucking punch them in the middle of their shit. I've seen so many animes now that it's just like, fuck that guy. But I was about to reference one of the concepts for a show idea I was coming up with in my brain one afternoon when I was just alone, because that's what I do constantly. I'm constantly coming up with bullshit, even though I don't plan to use it all the time. And I would personally be perfectly fine if someone took this idea and just ran with it. Just I don't. You know what? Credit me with the original idea if you do. I don't even want compensation. I just want to have my name on the hook. Okay. But the idea is pretty much a revenge story where someone goes, we have the Batman and Robin dynamic, right? We have older hero, younger hero. And it's set up the entire time with the notion that this younger man is going to make it to be the truth, right? Like the younger man is going to be the person who lives after this older hero is dying. But instead, the younger hero dies, and his mentor, role figure, takes his name and his identity and says, I am the one who died today. But you get to live on, and I will keep going. And basically adopts their entire personality, adopts who they are, and keeps living on as them instead. That's an interesting thing to me. You died before it was your time, so I must die instead to take your place. I will live for the both of us.
The thing is,
Anyways,
while
back
this
to the
is
video.
usually used to expand the lower bound of the story's tone and make it feel like anyone can die, it doesn't usually mean that anyone can actually permanently die now. Because again, plot armor exists for a reason. There was this really funny trend, it was funny to me anyway, in like the early 2010s where every popular show that was hitting the market was selling itself on the premise that anyone could die. Attack on Titan, Game of Thrones, The Walking Dead. I distinctly remember all these shows getting pitched as these dark, serious stories where being the main character wouldn't save you, and that's what made it cool. And they all have a moment where someone central and important dies to prove that that's a thing that can happen. But the thing is, a story where anyone can actually die is a story where a lot of threads are gonna go unresolved, which is a bad story. Like, if it leaves too many plot threads dangling, it's bad at being a story.
And this is why I say JJK. I'm just gonna keep referencing JJK because of how much murder is happening there. It's tearing my insides and my heart and my soul around, okay? People just shouldn't be dying. I want to see more of the characters, and every single one of them is an interesting motherfucker. Also, thank you for liking it, local.
Story. So most of these stories end up outfitting their leads with a nice set of plot armor after a season or two, which I remember disappointing the people who'd been pitching them as dark, badass, anyone can die narratives. But like, that doesn't mean this form of breaking tone armor doesn't have an impact. It reshapes the feel of the world by proving that being central to the plot is not enough to protect a character. Before we see it happen, we don't believe it can happen. There are other ways tone armor can be broken without necessarily killing anyone. For instance, sometimes the tone of the story is secretly being carried by one character. One ridiculously overpowered protagonist who single-handedly makes the threats they deal with look easy, one very skilled and smart hero who keeps their villainous rival in check, one character who keeps the tone light. And then the story gets rid of them. Maybe they're dead, maybe they're missing, maybe they're just yeeted out of the story for a while. Whatever happens, they aren't around to help anymore, and the rest of the characters have to deal with the stakes they leave behind. It turns out this character was doing a lot to keep things manageable, and without them essentially shielding the rest of the story, the dark parts of the plot get a lot.
Yeah. When the world goes, fuck. you're kind of fucked. You know, like that's just how life is sometimes. You know? When that happens, you gotta just gotta prepare, grit your teeth, and wait for your shit to get kicked in. If you can't tell, it's very funny to me. Do I have a situation where this happened in any of my? Nah, most of the time people aren't. I don't have things that are where one person's holding. No, I don't think I'd have one of these.
Darker. They do this in the Helsing OVAs, where Alucard is such a hilariously overpowered nightmare that in order to make the villains actually threatening, they lure him out and stick him on a boat for half the series, and while he's stuck on the boat, nearly everybody else dies when London is blitzkrieged by Nazi vampires. It's not the first time anyone dies in the show, but it's the first time the main characters end up in actual serious danger because they don't have their pocket Eldritch Abomination around to save the day. They also do this in Reboot Season 3! As if I would get through this video without highlighting the tonal downturn that defined my childhood. The first two seasons of Reboot are goofy, mostly wacky episodic adventures with the occasional tonal whiplash in the form of a season finale or unusually devastating scheme from the main villains. Then at the end of season 2, trickster Paragon protagonist Bob gets bundled into a rocket and fired into space, or rather the computer equivalent of space, the web, which is worse than space because it has Twitter in it. And without Bob, things get bad. Kid protagonist
Twitter
Enzo does
dimension
his best
would
to
be
live up to
so
his hero's
fucked.
example in single-handedly holding off the suddenly much bigger and scarier threats, and despite being a little kid and not a trained badass antiviral program, he holds it together decently well for a few episodes until he gets stuck in a Mortal Kombat game and loses his fucking eye in a show where the previous worst fate a hero could experience was a bad haircut. Things only get worse from there, with the kid heroes getting time-skip training montaged into grown-ups while trapped in the games, and back home sees the destruction of basically every iconic location from the first two seasons and the near-total victory of the big bad. And what makes this form of tone armor breakage work most effectively is that when the vanished S.H.I.E.L.D. character returns, things
There
start
is no
getting
X,
good
there is only
again.
Twitter.
These characters are such powerful forces that they just make things better around them, and when the heroes find them or save them or they just make it back on their own, everything starts getting better in a way that didn't seem possible when they were gone. The tone of the story follows them. When they're gone, the villains can run rampant, but when they're around, the story can have a happy ending. And honestly,
Basically, if someone is able to match up with your heaviest hitter and your heavy hitter leaves, turn the fuck around and leave. Don't keep fighting a fight like that. That's not worth it. I'm kind of feeling peckish. I want to go and grab me some. I'll do that after this video.
this is a remarkably effective way to make an otherwise kind of basic protagonist very impactful. If their presence in the story is what keeps the other characters safe, if their absence is what makes the story dip into tonal darkness that otherwise never happens, it's a very solid way to show don't tell how truly effective they are and how much they're doing for the story. One sneaky aspect of tone armor is that a lot of stories will threaten stakes that they would never actually pay off. This is extremely common in any sort of action setting where the implicit threat of main character death hangs over pretty much every combat encounter, or in stories where the villain's machinations threaten the end of the world as we know it. And while these are theoretical elements of the tone of the world because the story acknowledges them as possibilities, unlike, for instance, stories where death is not even acknowledged as a thing that can happen, they're kind of in a state of plausibility flux. The story recognizes that they are real threats, but never actually brings them into reality, so the audience doesn't necessarily buy them as part of the tone. A superhero story will threaten the apocalypse, but the mere existence of superheroes forestalls it from ever hitting, or in the worst case
Or at the very least, I'm now thinking, hey, I'm in the middle of a life-threatening altercation with someone. I'm going to win this fight. Proceeds to have both an arm and a leg from their torso. Ah, am I going to get like some cool sci-fi cybernetic prosthetics? Nope. What? Hey, yo, author, can I get some of those prosthetics, please? Oh, why? Because you deserve this. But there's literally other people. Shut the fuck up. You will not get any of the fancy shit. You will now suffer. Suffer. Um, what else was there? Oh yeah, this reminds me of the fact that fucking Kishimoto. I was gonna say Kishimura, but Kishimoto. Kishimoto was planning originally to kill Neji. And since he wasn't able to kill Neji back when he wanted to, he killed him in a really shitty way later on. He was just like, fuck, stick.
Scenario lasting longer than a week. In these cases, tone armor can be cracked with temporary forays into what-if scenarios, or more commonly, in season finales or big crossover arcs, which is
Oh
usually
yeah, what
when
if
the threats are
episodes are
allowed to
fucking
get
awful?
more present and real, and the heroes switch from apocalypse prevention to apocalypse repair. These are odd little stakes cul-de-sacs where the story briefly gets a lot more perilous, but then snaps back to normal, establishing that the story can get that dark, but it won't stay that dark for long. This is how you can smoothly get unexpectedly dark single episodes of otherwise mostly lighthearted stories without it being ridiculously jarring. If the level of danger experienced in the one-shot extreme peril
So I know that I can't hear the gunshot, but the reaction to someone who thinks that they're playing around, pulling a trigger, I'm assuming that woman is dead.
arc is in line with the
Or at
level of
least
danger
maimed
threatened
horribly.
by the rest
Yep.
of the story. It's not completely story-breaking, it's just pleasantly tense. And that's kind of a narrow balance to strike. Tone armor is a mostly invisible element of storytelling that I frankly have never seen anyone directly discuss, but it plays a huge role in how stories feel and what a writer can do with them without dislodging or confusing their audience. Breaking a story's established tone armor is always an impactful moment. The first time we see a character bleed or break a bone or just straight up die is the first time the story proves it's willing to go there and could potentially go there again. But breaking the tone too violently risks relinquishing the story over into the joint custody of comedy and tragedy. Thus far, we've really only talked about stories that break their tone armor in relatively small ways, going from no blood to one drop of blood, or threatening Armageddon to taste-testing Armageddon, or this character has been successfully protecting us to the character's gone and the things they were protecting us from are actually really bad. Shifts that are one step outside the established tonal range. That's because if a story breaks its own tone armor by going from 0 to 100, it's not darkly impactful, it's jarringly hilarious. Characters experiencing realistic consequences from cartoonish violence is a common dark joke.
Oh yeah, it is. Like, we're never gonna get something bad. Actually, hold up. Totally not about to reference something awful. Anyone remember Smile HD? I remember Smile HD.
Genre-bending, lighthearted cartoon characters into dark and gory scenarios is used for instant shock factor. Everyone makes fun of the CW for taking colorful kids media and sexing it up for live action and whatever the hell else they did with Riverdale before they finally let it die, because that kind of shift is intrinsically funny. Everyone took the piss out of Sonic Forces when they dropped this little chestnut. Hell, just
Hold on. What?
Intrinsically
What
funny.
did Sonic do?
Everyone took the piss
I just received some incredible news. Sonic is alive.
out of Sonic Forces when they dropped
He's captured in the orbiting prison. My spider says he's in a solitary confinement cell, and they've been torturing him for months. I now understand what Red is saying, because I read that, and I didn't even take it seriously, because it's Sonic. I just went, oh yeah, okay, yeah, that's flavor text. Sonic's not actually injured. Only to realize that if he had actually been like, Tails! They cut off my fucking foot! I can't run anymore! Like, that would have been really fucked. Like, that would be completely fucked.
this little chestnut. Hell, just transposing wacky animated violence into the context of a live-action adaptation can take a fight scene from feeling wacky to feeling uncomfortably visceral. When tone armor is broken, the first thing it does is make the audience feel unsafe. There was previously a narrow band of conceivable stakes that the story stayed within the boundaries of, and breaking the tone armor breaches those borders, and that means the audience no longer knows what to expect. The characters are in danger in a way they weren't before. That kind of subversion of expectations.
So, blunt force trauma exists now. This is a very serious moment. 2 episodes ago, you hit him with a mallet, and he crumpled into a cylindrical.
Can be played up for tragedy, comedy, or both, but it can't be pushed too far if the intent is to keep the audience in the story. If you break the rules too hard,
This still reminds me of my fucking little of my OC that has basically childish Toon Force. As long as they can keep playing things off as a joke and they don't take it seriously, they can basically have Toon Force. The second they start actually taking things seriously, they get fucking mollywopped with attacks. It's like, oh no. Um, Actually, that's kind of funny now that I think about it because I'm imagining a scenario where they just like, aha, I'm in the middle of a fight. Person goes, well, I have something that would actually break you out of your childish ignorance. And he's like, what could break me? Pulls out a fucking letter, hands it to him. He's like, I'll read this letter. There's nothing that this can say. Just sees that he has to pay his mortgage, child support, and rent. He's like, you know what? Just shoot me.
The audience gets jarred loose and stops being invested because they have no idea what to expect anymore. There's a reason it's inherently hilarious to consider where you would put a single F-bomb in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. No matter where it goes, it will never fit the tone. That's why it's funny. Trying to do it seriously would be like ice skating uphill. If you
Pulls out
break
tax
the
returns. Jesus Christ. Not the taxes, dude. The true way to beat the one reality bending character. He's like, bro, I have literal Toon Force. He's like, your Toon Force only lasts as long as you have childish ignorance and or childish just not giving a fuck. Like literally, when you're at peace, you have Toon Force, but I have to just break your peace. Behold, taxes. Ah, my kryptonite! How dare you! Don't worry. Just take this little pill. It's made of lead and it's fired out of a cylinder directly into your soul. Bang!
invisible rules that have been holding the story in shape this whole time, sometimes all the audience can do is laugh and then disinvest, because once the punchline is over, the audience leaves. So, yeah? I'll be honest, I've done some weird trope talks. This is probably the first one where I was like, man, I hope any of this makes sense.
Bro, this is some of the most best trope talking shit ever. This is beautiful. This is lovely. By the way, everyone, my name's Bendel. Go into the description. The original link to the video is there. If you somehow managed to get through all of my bullshit, congratulations. You're a good person. Oh, don't worry about them. They can subscribe if they feel like it. I purely just want you to go into the description, check out them, support them. I'm going to leave their Patreon down there. Subscribe to their Patreon, check out all their stuff. As for me, you can personally do a couple things for me. Number one, if you like the video, just enjoy it. Well, no, not if you like the video. If you like the video, you can like the video because you enjoyed it. You can comment because you have literally anything to say. Say whatever you want. And then subscription because, well, you can subscribe for two different reasons. I'd like you to subscribe for both reasons. Please do so. But the reason number one is you think I am worthy of your subscription. Thank you if you do. And the reason number two is because you would like to come back around and support. And yeah, those are my two reasons. Thank you very much and have a lovely day.